This is the Ethanol Report, the industry podcast from the Renewable Fuels Association since 2008. I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
Well, the 2024 presidential election is finally over, and the result is that the 45th President of the United States will return to the White House to become the 47th President. I am speaking with Geoff Cooper, the President and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association, to get some post-election reaction. First of all, just the basics, Geoff. What is RFA's reaction to the election of President Trump for a second term?
Well, Cindy, we're certainly looking forward to working with President Trump again and his new administration, incoming administration. And I think, as we look at President Trump's priorities and goals and the things he campaigned on, we see ethanol being a perfect fit and being very consistent with his vision and his goals. It checks a lot of the boxes that are on President Trump's to-do list, whether that is, you hear him talk about American energy dominance and putting American energy first. Well, what could be more American energy than ethanol produced from the products that U.S. farmers are growing by U.S. small businesses scattered across the country? Whether you're talking about supporting jobs and bringing jobs back to the manufacturing sector and supporting jobs in agriculture, supporting farmers. Of course, that's what the ethanol industry does. We support more than 400,000 jobs across the U.S. economy. So that's another box that we're able to check. Energy security, food security have been priorities and goals for President-elect Trump. And of course, we fit that mold as well. And then, he doesn't talk about this as much, but we certainly have heard President Trump talk about his goal to ensure that Americans have access to clean air and water. And so there is an environmental aspect that is important to President Trump as well when we think about clean air. And of course, ethanol helps with that as well. And that we have proven benefits when it comes to improving air quality and protecting human health. So again, as we look at kind of the long list of things that are important to President-elect Trump and the things that we know that he's going to be focused on beginning on day one, ethanol checks all those boxes. So we again are looking very excitedly forward to working with President Trump and the new administration as it is coming together, along with the new Congress. We can talk about that too.
Well, and President Trump is not an unknown quantity. You did work with him before. He hasn't said a lot about ethanol or biofuels during this election cycle, during the campaign, but you worked with him quite a bit in the previous administration, right?
That's right. And in the previous Trump 1.0, I guess you'd call it, he was a strong supporter of ethanol and was directly involved in a lot of policy discussions and conversations around ethanol and the future of our industry and especially around E15. He made it his personal mission to direct EPA to undertake rulemaking that would allow the year-round sale of E15. And as you'll recall, Cindy, President Trump actually came to one of our member plants, Southwest Iowa Renewable Energy, in 2019 to celebrate the completion of that rulemaking and the approval of year-round E15. I was able to spend some time with President Trump that day. Of course, we know what happened next is the oil industry sued EPA over that regulation. The courts overturned it. And so we're back in a situation where we still need some permanent resolution and permanent relief to allow year-round E15. Unfortunately, we learned through that process that the president cannot, with the stroke of a pen, fix this issue, and it's going to take Congress and it's going to take legislation. But we are confident that President Trump will be willing to work with his allies in Congress, leadership in both the House and Senate, to encourage them to get this over the goal line, get it done, get it behind us, so that consumers can benefit from lower prices at the pump, and farmers can benefit from expanded market opportunities, and our industry can benefit from expanded demand as well. So that's what we're hopeful we see when it comes to E15. And again, President Trump has a lot of history and a track record on E15, and so that's exciting to us.
Well, unfortunately, with Trump 1.0, he didn't have some of the best people in his administration, especially in EPA, which caused some problems for ethanol. But what do you think about him having a better team with him this time?
Well, we did experience some challenges, to say the least, with the first administrator of EPA, Scott Pruitt, who came up with the concept of just issuing small refinery exemptions in the dark of night, with no transparency, really no public process whatsoever, just giving exemptions to any refinery that came asking for one, from their renewable fuel standard obligations. And we know what sort of negative impact that had on the marketplace. It took a tremendous toll on our industry. 2018, 2019 were some of the roughest years we've seen in the past couple of decades, in large part because of demand being undermined secretly, by the small refinery exemptions that former Administrator Pruitt was handing out. So we are optimistic that this time around, we're going to start off on a much better footing with EPA and the new administration when it comes to management of the renewable fuel standard. I don't think anybody wants a repeat of that that situation the first couple of years of the last Trump administration. So hopefully we can start fresh, start clean, and have EPA administering and enforcing the RFS in the manner that Congress intended.
Well, Trump has also made no secret of his dislike for electric vehicles, for EVs, even though he loves Elon. But
Yeah.
what do you think about the future of an EV mandate with the new Trump administration?
Yeah, I think that's one area, where we are really excited, to see what steps a Trump administration is going to take to reel in some of the ridiculous policies that have been put in place around electric vehicles. And again, the tail when Trump says, "Hey, on day one, I'm going to do away with the EV mandate," he's talking about EPA's tailpipe standards, which were set so stringently for the years between 2027 and 2032 that they are effectively a mandate. They essentially force automakers to dramatically reduce their production of internal combustion engines that are fueled by liquid fuels, and dramatically ramp up their production of battery electric vehicles. So we are, I think, optimistic that is going to be high on the list of President Trump's early actions. Is he's going to take a really hard look at reforming and rescinding and changing and putting in place much more reasonable tailpipe emission standards that we think can accomplish the same goals. If the goal is to reduce emissions, we can absolutely do that. But let's not be dictating what technologies, what sort of vehicles have to be used to do that. And again, I think, if you've listened to what President Trump has said on EVs, it's not that he is opposed to electric vehicles. In fact, he's been pretty complimentary of Tesla's technologies and pretty complimentary of some electric vehicles. What he's not a fan of, and what we're not fans of, is mandating that consumers purchase those vehicles and mandating that automakers make those vehicles at the expense of other technologies and other vehicle types that consumers are actually asking for. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Of course, we've got litigation that is ongoing on EPA's tailpipe standards. We, along with, I think, 54 other parties, have sued EPA over those standards because there is no law anywhere on any books that gives EPA the authority to mandate the production of electric vehicles. So we think that's going to be something to watch early in the next Trump administration, and one of the first things that we expect to see EPA taking on.
Well, another thing that is a concern, I guess, is what might happen with the Inflation Reduction Act and the funding that has been put forward for to help move in the direction of sustainable aviation fuel for ethanol and climate smart agriculture. What are your concerns there?
Well, we do know that President-elect Trump has said on the campaign trail that one of his top priorities and one of Congress's top priorities is going to be extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act provisions that are expiring at the end of 2025, which is good, because if they don't do that, then every American is going to face a huge tax increase come 2026. But to do that, they're going to have to find ways of offsetting that foregone revenue and paying for these tax cuts. And one of the ways that has been suggested by some is, well, we'll just claw back all of the unspent Inflation Reduction Act funding, all of the unspent funding from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed into law early in the Biden administration. And that gives us some concern, obviously. But I think we've been encouraged to see many in the Republican Party, including Speaker Johnson, not too long ago, stepping up and saying, look, we need to be judicious as we have that conversation about, clawing back funding from the IRA. We need to use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, I think were the words he used. And there are pieces of the Inflation Reduction Act that are quite attractive and quite popular, regardless of what party you're in. If you look at where IRA funding has been distributed so far, some analyses suggest that 80% of it has gone to projects that are in districts, congressional districts, that voted for President Trump, into ruby red districts in many cases. So these are benefiting Americans who voted for President Trump. So I think that's going to be something to watch. 45Z, we think, again, has broad bipartisan support. We know there are a lot of Republicans in both the House and Senate that don't want to see that program go away. They don't want to see it completely jettisoned. Maybe some changes need to be made to it. Maybe there's some things that can be improved. But we're pretty confident that 45Z and some of the other credits under the IRA program will be spared, will remain in some form or fashion. The big concern is around the timing of when we have rules on these credits. When is our industry going to know exactly how these programs are going to operate in practice? I mean, by law, 45Z is supposed to become available on January 1st, so 2 months from now. And we don't have even interim guidance. We don't have a proposed rule. We don't have anything from the Treasury on what 45Z is going to look like. And now I think post-election, there's concern that we may not see any sort of guidance or proposal anytime soon, and that it's likely going to be sometime after the Trump administration is settled in that this gets picked back up and addressed. And so now you're well into 2025 before you have any clarity or certainty around what 45Z is actually going to look like. So the real concern we have is around timing. It's around the uncertainty that we expect in the near term. But longer term, like I said, we do see strong support for that tax credit program from both sides of the aisle. And so we think in some form or fashion, that program should be available to our industry long term.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about Congress. First of all, we've got that has a couple of different aspects here. We've got the lame duck Congress coming up here that is probably going to have to take some action on these expiring tax credits that 45Z was supposed to replace. So let's start there about with that.
Well, that's right. There are existing tax credits for certain biofuels that are in place today. The Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in 2022 extended many of those tax credits through the end of this year. So through the end of 2024, we've got the biodiesel blenders tax credit. We've got the second generation biofuel producer credit. There's a biogas investment tax credit, and a couple others. And those credits were all extended through the end of 2024. And then the idea was they all transform, they all morph into the 45Z program. They all come under that 45Z umbrella. But again, that umbrella doesn't exist today. We don't know what that umbrella looks like. We don't know when we're going to see that umbrella. So there is a growing conversation on Capitol Hill around, hey, maybe we should just extend these existing tax credits one more year as a bridge to 45Z or whatever it ends up being called and whatever it ends up looking like. But extending these existing credits for a year, buying Congress and a new administration time to sort this out and put rules in place so that our industry and other industries will have the certainty they need to make investments. So that conversation is happening. And in fact, Congresswoman Miller Meeks from Iowa and Congresswoman Sharice Davids, Democrat out of Kansas, introduced a bill that would extend the second generation producer credit, which is kind of the cellulosic biofuel tax credit, by 1 year. There's already been a bill introduced to extend the biodiesel credit by a year. So again, we look at all that, and it seems to be pointing toward, maybe we bundle some of these extenders together, or these tax credits together into a 1 year extender package that could take flight during lame duck and at least tide us over in 2025 while the future of 45Z and the Inflation Reduction Act is being sorted out.
Right. Probably not a whole lot else is going to get done here before the end of the year. Certainly not a farm bill. Only what actually
Right.
has to get done is probably going to get done between now and then.
That's how we see it, Cindy. I mean, I think especially if Republicans retain control of the House, which it increasingly looks like they will, then I think lame duck is very uneventful. Republicans are going to want to just push off any new business, any major legislation until the new Congress. And so, yeah, I think Farm Bill, you're going to need to see some sort of, short-term patch or extension. We're definitely going to need to see a continuing resolution or some, a spending measure to, again, tide us over into the new year. But beyond that, we would not expect to see much occurring in a lame duck session.
Well, what do you think about the results of the congressional elections? Senate the Republicans have control in Senate. House is still up for grabs, but did you see any races that you think hurt or helped ethanol?
Well, I think it was overall a very good night for ethanol supporters in Congress in both chambers. We saw some of our strongest supporters win re-election, and in the House where there were some really close races, we saw many of our friends and allies coming out on top in those races. I mentioned Congresswoman Miller Meeks, who introduced the second generation extender bill. She was in probably the tightest race of anyone. I think there were something like 400,000 votes cast in Iowa's first congressional district race. And last count, she was, with 99% of the vote in, she was ahead by about 800 votes. So it was a just down to the wire, very close race again in that district. It was very close last time around, but we were incredibly happy to see her prevailing. She's been just such a fantastic champion for not just the ethanol industry and renewable fuels, but for agriculture in general. Very science-oriented, fact-oriented member of Congress. Has an eye on, she's part of the climate, has been part of the climate caucus. So, is keeping an eye on those discussions as well. Just a great supporter, and we were happy to see her pull it out. I mean, Don Bacon, Nebraska too, was another one of those very close races. We were excited to see him pull it out in the end. And like I said, there were probably a dozen to 15 races that we knew were going to be very close for some of our best supporters and champions in the House, and they won all of them. So it was a great night for ethanol in terms of the election. And then in the Senate, we did see Senator Brown from Ohio, Sherrod Brown, unfortunately lose. But we're looking forward to working with Mr. Moreno, who won that election and is coming in and will represent Ohio. But beyond that, I mean, we again kind of saw from top to bottom a strong night for our friends and supporters in the Senate.
Well, one state vote that I saw that has an impact on ethanol was the South Dakota referendum on a law that was passed by the legislature earlier this year designed to help the carbon pipeline project in that state, and that failed. Tell us about that and what it means.
Well, I think what it means is, on to Plan B, and that certainly I think was viewed as a setback, but is not. I don't think is going to stop that project from advancing. It just puts it on a slightly different course, and some adjustments are going to need to be made. But that project is just too important to the future of our industry and to the future of rural America to to just pack up and go home. And we don't think that's going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. We know that they're going to put Plan B into action, and we remain confident that that project is going to move forward, and it's going to be a great benefit to the ethanol industry and the farmers that supply feedstock to us. So it was a setback, yes, but certainly not the end of the story. And we'll keep moving forward on that one.
Well, overall, it does seem like rural America is what came out for the vote this year. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it did appear that turnout in rural counties was up based on what I saw. When in many other, when you looked at other areas, other demographics, turnout was down in a lot of cases. There were a lot of certain blocks of voters that didn't turn out like they did 4 years ago. But one that did is the farm vote and rural America. And that's good. I mean, I think we are always preaching to our membership and our friends in agriculture that you've got to make your voices heard. And your vote is your voice. So it was good to see such high levels of turnout, and that's the way this process is supposed to work.
All right. Thanks very much, Geoff Cooper, President and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association. If you want to find out more about ethanol or RFA, just go to ethanolrfa.org. Thanks for listening.